Welcome to the Kingdom Culture Podcast that was created on purpose with a purpose to empower, uplift, and guide others to the center of God's perfect will. Let's kick off this season with my story. Welcome to Kingdom Culture Podcast. My name is Abril Teran, and before I get into what I'm going to talk about today, I wanted to give you some feedback on why this podcast was created. One, I love people. I love hearing their stories. I love sitting down at a table and just getting to know one another, the things that they've overcome, the things that they've gone through. And I also love stories of places they've been. So this podcast is going to be a lot of different things, but I love hearing the stories behind people, and I have a heart for migration. So my whole family and we migrated from Mexico to the U.S. So you'll be able to hear different interviews and different things with different people and their stories and the ways that they adapted to come here. I also love helping others. I've gone through a lot of things in my life, and it's taken me a long time to heal through those things. And I feel like if I had somebody like me to give me some advice, I wouldn't have gone through half of the stuff that I've gone through, right? So that's why I'm here. I'm here to share my story and be vulnerable and give you some insight on the different perspectives of living in a Hispanic household or being a Mexican and having, grown up more in America than in Mexico, and just different perspectives of my life. I just want to put them out there and bring them to light so that in hopes that somebody sees this and is inspired and knows that it's okay. Anyway, thank you so much for being here, and I hope that you can become a family member of the Kingdom Culture fam and stay for a while. Kingdom Culture family, thank you so much for being here. My name is Abril Teran, and thank you for tuning in to the first episode ever of the Kingdom Culture podcast. Today, I want to talk about self-worth. I feel like a lot of us think that, self-worth is just a meaning or just a saying that people use nowadays. But in reality, it comes from different things. It comes rooted from different things, how you grew up, your parents, what you put your self-worth on, you see yourself. How you see yourself is what aligns everything else in your life. So I'm going to give you a little bit of feedback of how I grew up. So I am 29 years old now, but for a little while there, I lived with my grandmother only and my other brother in Mexico. And I remember that when I was 7 years old, my grandmother said, "Hey, we're packing up all your stuff and you're going to the U.S. to live with your mom." And in all of that, right, I never really had a true relationship with my mother. Like, there was some abandonment issues there that I had to work through. There was some things with my father as well. My father was not part of the picture. And if he wasn't the biggest role model. So, going from Mexico, a place that I knew, with somebody that I knew, that I grew up with, to the U.S., a whole new everything, new culture, new language, new whatever else, was a big culture shock for me. I remember the first night that I ever came to my mom's house. It was dark. My aunt was with my mom, and my other 3 siblings that I had never met before were in the living room as well. So that was a big thing for me. I think if I can recall a little bit, you're 7 years old, you kind of just don't remember everything. But some emotions that I can put out there is I was in fear. I felt like I didn't know what I was going into. I kind of just got thrown in there, right? And I didn't know how to process my emotions. And I never really built a relationship with my mom before, like today. Because, she would come and go to Mexico, but I don't really remember, like, her being part of my day-to-day conversations, or her calling me, or just, having that mother-daughter relationship that we all crave and desire. So from that, I already had a thing with, like, my emotions. I'm not going to talk about them. I don't know you. I don't know these people, so I'm not going to open up. And I feel like my self-worth started to root out of those things of, like, no, I have to take care of me. My parents were never really in the picture. So I never really had advice on how to grow up and what to do and what not to do. And even when my mom took care of 5 of us because she ended up being a single mom of 5. She did the best that she could, but she was never really around, and she really never had big rules or was strict with any of us. I started dating when I was 13. I never really had the word no said to me. I grew up really like just figuring out life by myself. And with that, I feel like it came with the whole atmosphere of the way that we grew up. My mom was working. We all started working when we were super young. I was 12 years old when I started working. And I remember, thinking that was normal. Fast forward and you grow up, high school years, you kind of just go with the flow. I wanted to do a lot of extracurricular activities, but I knew that my mom would work late till like 6 or 8 p.m. So it'd be impossible for her to like drop me off at practices or drop me off here and there. So I never really did all of that. I think I was just a choir kid and theater and soccer. And I didn't even play soccer. I was just the manager, right? So there was a lot of things that I feel like I never got to experience as well because of the way that we grew up. I know that working in the summer times during high school, I used to get a lot of people that would say, hey, come, let's go to the beach. We're going out. We're going to have a sleepover. Come hang out with us. And I'd be like, oh, no, I can't. I'm working. I'm working from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. sometimes. And a lot of people didn't understand that. But to me, that was normal. So I grew up struggling, right, with my emotions. I grew up not knowing who to go to for advice. I grew up putting my self-worth on relationships, friendships. I grew up kind of just going with the flow and not really like taking how you hear like nowadays people take the steering wheel and take charge of your life. I grew up just going with the punches and figuring it all out, right? And a lot of that I feel like had to do with the fact that I didn't have parents that were strict or really cared about what I was into. My mom, she was very, very, very loving, very caring. She wanted to be there for us. She wanted us to know that whatever we needed, she had it. But we never really dug deep and talked about emotions. I don't ever remember talking about traumas that I've gone through as a kid. The fact that, she had to get a divorce and we had to move from where we were living at in Texas to Michigan, and we stayed here. It was just like, oh no, this is what we're doing now. Everybody adjust. Or the fact that we had never met my siblings. So my brother and I, Mariko is his name, we grew up together, but my other 3 siblings I had never met. We had never even said hello before we came into this house together, and we never talked about that. We never talked about like, so how did you grow up? What were your grandparents like? Where did you come from? Like, how was your part of Mexico? We never talked about those things. We never just sat down and expressed our feelings. So when I would get into trouble or weird things, I actually had my other friends' parents help me because I felt more comfortable with them than to go to my mom and say, Mom, I'm going through this. Mom, this is happening. Mom, X, Y, and Z. But also I think that the lack of leadership is what led me to go through all of these traumatic events. I feel like if I had parents, things would have been a lot different. And obviously my mom took care of us the best that she could. I mean, she was a single mom of 5. I can't complain. Never, ever did I lack food, clothes, or a place to sleep. And that's important, But I also wish that I could have grown up with a mom that told me, hey, don't put your worth on boys. Don't put your worth on money. Don't put your worth on your appearance. Don't put your worth on outer things. Put your worth on the Lord and know that you were beautifully and wonderfully made. So with that, relationships for me were a little tricky, obviously, because I didn't have my parents around. So from right there, the trauma of my self-worth started. Having my dad there, but not having my dad there was weird for me because when we were living with my grandmother, he already had a whole nother family. We already had other siblings as well from his side. And I never understood why he would sleep at that house, but never sleep at our house or with us or take us out somewhere to eat or anything like that. I never had that relationship with him either. So growing up, I always had to prove myself, right? And coming here to the U.S., not knowing English, not knowing what to expect, what to do, how to be, I think I had the mindset of like, nope, my mom did all this. We came here because we need a better life, and from that, my self-worth was put on the skills that I attained, how much money I was making by the time that I was 16, 17. And my friendships and relationships really shaped who I became growing up in high school. I remember I was a big people pleaser. Boyfriends were a big part of me or whatever, I guess. I would always try not to be alone. I dated a lot, and I dated for a long time. And I remember like not even knowing why I started dating in the first place. Like my mom and I never had a real conversation of like, oh, relationships X, Y, and Z. Like you should do this, you shouldn't do this. This is normal. This isn't normal. If a person's treating you like this, if they're talking to you like this, if they're, trying to get something that they're not supposed to at the age that you're in, I just wish I had somebody that told my 13-year-old self, Abril, wait. Please wait to date. Understand that from 13 years old to your late 20s, you can just be by yourself. It's totally fine. You can get to know people and get to date, and see if they're a good fit for your life in the future that you're trying to build. But you shouldn't be dating at the age of 13, 14, 15, 16, because at that stage, like your hormones are going crazy. You're growing up as a person and you're trying to kind of form in your mind who you are. Those are the stages of life where I feel like if I would have focused on school, if I would have focused on good things, if I would have focused on my passions and the things that I love, I wouldn't have been heartbroken at 15, 16, 17, 18, and then going forward 21, 22, 23, 24, making the wrong decisions based on relationships. Because I did get heartbroken a lot. I was abused, which is another whole topic we can get into later. I put my self-worth on men, and I let men treat me like nothing. I have a lot of trauma from not being put first. I have a lot of trauma from putting my self-worth where it doesn't belong, right? So growing up, I just thought like, oh, my dad, I saw him beat up his wife one time, and I thought that was normal. Like, oh, she probably did something. Why? Because nobody explained to me, like, hey, if somebody makes you feel bad the first time, believe them and walk away. If somebody doesn't know your worth and doesn't show you that they truly know who you are and love you, walk away. If somebody shows you that they are broken themselves and there's something within them that you cannot handle, walk away. If somebody shows you, that they're just playing with you, they're not being real, they're not loving you fully and accept you fully, walk away. And that's okay, right? Nobody told me, look for these red flags, Abril, because you're going to get demolished by the world out here because, broken people hurt people. And that's what happened with me. I put my self-worth on my skills, my money. So I started a business when I was 17, and I kind of just ran with it. Didn't know what I was doing, wasted so much time, wasted so much money, wasted well, I wouldn't say wasted really, because mistakes make you who you are. So I was able to attain different skills, but never was able to put them all together to make it something real. And now I'm here, and I can tell you that the skills that I learned back then have helped me get to this point where I am in life. But if somebody would have said, Abril, you need a mentor, Abril, you shouldn't be chasing money. Like, money comes and goes, and the more that you chase it, the faster that it goes. Abril, your self-worth is actually set in stone with Christ, and how you are is perfect, right? You don't have to show off. You don't have to prove yourself to anybody. And chasing those things, chasing material things is exhausting. Very, very exhausting. And coming from a Hispanic household where you just knew work from 12 to 12-hour days, seven days a week, it's kind of like, this is normal. I'm just going to work myself to exhaustion and hope that one day I become financially free. And with that, my work ethic is really shaped on how I grew up, and I pray to the Lord that one day, I'm able to sit in front of this camera and tell you, guess what, you guys, I have a whole thing that the Lord has handed me, right? But before, it was more about the money. Like, I have to make my mom proud, and how I need to do that is through money. I never really got to sit down growing up through my high school years, through my early 20s, to say, Mom, this is what I love. This is what makes me happy. Can we learn about this? Hey, can you buy me books so that I learn about different things? That wasn't my focus at all. My focus was work, men, keeping friendships that were not good for me, and just being a people pleaser. And that really hurt me growing up, because I didn't know who I was. And you know what? You lose yourself when you truly never know who you are. I never took the time to experience new things, experience what I liked, what I didn't like. And now that I'm doing it, now that I'm going through this healing journey and realizing, like, hey, I love movies. I love going out to the beach. I love water. It just calms me down. Like, I get to know who I am internally. And it's not a phase of like, oh, this person is my friend and they like hot Cheetos. I have to like hot Cheetos too. Or, oh, wow, look, a new group of friends. I better make sure that, I show off my money and I show them that I love them and that I'll take care of everything they need. And I think as I grew up older and now that I'm going through my healing journey, I have some points that I want to bring out so that you can actually figure out if you're in a state of still figuring out who you are, figuring out, is this really what I want to do? This is really, am I putting my self-worth on outer things instead of accepting yourself fully, loving yourself exactly as you are, so that when you bring other people around your life, you're not in a state of putting a piece of you in everything that you touch and slowly losing yourself. For me, relationships is a big thing, and I'm still like trying to figure this thing out of like, how much is giving too much? How much is, what are boundaries? What is something that one person did that I didn't like? What is something that I'm not okay with? What kind of type of actual people do I want to have around? So what I did is realized, okay, I grew up by myself. I didn't have parents that told me, you can't go out past 10 p.m. You can't go and ride in people's cars just because. You can't date at a certain age. You cannot wear certain things. You can, I grew up without all of that, right? So talking with some friends, they shared that, they grew up with these things, and they also shared that if they didn't have their parents, because I did ask them, like, what do you think your life would have been like if you didn't have a parental supervision, like strict parents like that? And one of them shared that if she didn't have her dad in her life, she probably would have sought validation from men and chased relationships. And I feel like that's what I did because, one, I didn't have my dad. And if I did have them, I was always trying to prove that I was worthy of his love. Again, your self-worth is put on something else outside of you. And that's what causes the trauma. That's what causes you to be confused and not know who you are. So I think, knowing yourself is key. Be very self-aware. Allow yourself to know what triggers you, what doesn't trigger you. Allow yourself to know, like, I'm okay with this thing, but I'm not okay with the other. Have grace with yourself, please. Have grace and know that you are doing your best. Have grace and know that where you are today is exactly where you want to be, and you can always be better. There's always a possibility for you to grow and be better. Do different things. So get to know yourself. I think that this third point is the main one that I want to bring out today. For you to be able to know what you love and who you are and everything else, there's a certain point in life where you have to be alone. For me, I was never okay with being alone again, right? Because I had abandonment issues, anxieties, and things like that. But spend as much time alone as you can. And I'm not saying like go into a corner and like close the blinds and like not let the world in, but go on dates by yourself, go experience things by yourself, go to the movies by yourself, go to dinners by yourself. And that like truly honestly it helps you become okay with who you are. I know that when I first started this journey, I really had to sit down and like unbottle all of these emotions and realize like there's nothing wrong with this emotion. This emotion is a trigger to tell me that there's something wrong and I need to find the root of it. I also found out that I'm actually not okay with people that, do not reciprocate what I bring out to them or what I give them. And it's not that I'm, asking for them to be exactly like me, but to a point where I would let friendships just come and go as they wanted. There was people in my life that were disrespecting me and I was just letting it go because I didn't know my own boundaries. I didn't know myself enough to know that like, hey, that kind of bothers me, that kind of hurts, so you know what, I'm gonna love you from afar and that's okay. Knowing yourself is truly the key for everything else, because how you look at yourself, how you look in the mirror, how you feel about yourself, how you talk to yourself, how you present yourself to yourself is what shapes everything else around you. Friendships, relationships, your job, the way that you show up for others, the way that you allow yourself to be around everything else. So knowing yourself is key. Another thing is journaling really helped me realize that I had a lot of hurt and things that I hadn't healed from that were actually pouring into all of my other relationships and friendships. So journaling really truly helped with all of that. And having true friends. With me, it took me a while, but I finally found a group of friends that love me for me and that accept me and that tell me when I'm being toxic or whatever word you want to use that's a big term of today, and they make me accountable. So accountability. Find people that can make sure that you're accountable. Find people that love you and will correct you in love, not in a rude way, not in a way where you feel, that they're attacking you, but in a way that's safe and you are able to see where you're being wronged or where you're wrong, right? So accountability is another big one. And then the last thing I want to share is the fact that your self-worth comes from the Lord. Now you might be a believer, you might not be, but I used to be one of those people that didn't want to hear about God in any way, but I need to share my foundation of how I started healing, and that's through the Lord. I realized that it wasn't my parents who made me who I am. I realized that my friendships couldn't make these big holes in my heart go away. I found out that, the Lord is what I need to put my foundation on. Who I am is through Him. So truly tapping into my faith and realizing that the Lord loves me exactly as I am, not caring about other people's opinions, not comparing myself to somebody that's in the same age as me but has, more things or a better relationship with their parents or knows themselves so much and has so much confidence. Stop comparing yourself. Find out who you are. Stay in your own lane and make it happen. Heal for you, not for anybody else, because everything that you do starts here. Everything is internal. So the moment that you decide that enough is enough and you want to change yourself is when you truly try to dig deep and find those things that are holding you back. So with that, I'm going to leave you with this. Stop comparing yourself. Stop putting your self-worth on outer things and do the inner healing. Allow yourself to make mistakes and fail forward, because that's where your grace to yourself comes from. And fall in love with who you are, because you were perfectly and wonderfully made. I hope that you return for our next week's episode. And you can find me on YouTube, and I'll also put my Instagram and my Facebook on the details below. And I hope that you find some value in this and you can share it with others, right? I always say that the best way to grow is through people. So if you found something good in this podcast, I hope that you return and that you share it along. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next week.